Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, may I ask you to take your seats? Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the conference HCNM at 30, Lessons Learned and Potential Challenges, Building Long-Term Social Cohesion in Southeastern Europe. My name is Irina Olesiuk, and I am Head of Section and Senior Advisor to the High Commissioner on National Minorities. It will be my honor and pleasure to guide you through this introductory high-level panel. The Office of the High Commissioner on National Minorities is honored to be co-hosting today's event with the 2023 North Macedonia Chairpersonship. North Macedonia has been a long-time partner of the HCNM, so it is fitting to take the opportunity of their chairpersonship coinciding with our 30th anniversary to reflect on our joint efforts for social cohesion and long-term conflict prevention. We are pleased to see so many friends and colleagues here today sharing our interest in these important issues for Southeastern Europe. Before I introduce the speakers, I would like to remind guests that this event is being live streamed. And now, to deliver the opening remarks, it is my honor to give the floor to the OSCE Chairman in Office and Minister of Foreign Affairs of North Macedonia, His Excellency Bujar Osmani. Mr. Osmani, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Esteemed Excellencies, distinguished speakers, dear participants. It is a distinct pleasure to be with you today and to be able to share my views and reflections on how to build long-term social cohesion in Southeast Europe and beyond. I personally hold this theme dear and close to my heart as it carries a significant and special meaning, especially in today's era of polarization and division. My entire career in public service has been devoted to this noble goal. It is both a source and catalyst of my political engagement. The constructive power of social cohesion prevails over the destructive impact of fragmentation and discord. It is most definitely one of the answers to the complex challenges that face humanity. Cohesion is antidote to division. When you build a house, a diverse community, each brick matters. Social cohesion in this case is the plaster that glues the bricks, keeping the house firm, stable, and resilient. Our common house, the OSCE, stands resilient in the face of today's challenges. Despite the tectonic security shifts across the OSCE region as the Russian Federation's war of aggression against Ukraine continues to produce wide-ranging shockwaves. It severely damages peace, harms dialogue and cooperation, while creating deep rifts and scars to social cohesion. This must stop now. The OSCE region has a long history and culture of respect for national minority rights and peaceful coexistence between different communities. My own country, North Macedonia, treasures and nurtures our unique model of functional multi-ethnic democracy, coupled with solid social cohesion across its diverse communities. We have every right to speak out with our credible voice in support of all the efforts of this organization, its field missions, and autonomous institutions to protect the values of social cohesion and promote the rights of different minority groups. Being at the helm of the OSCE in times when these values are challenged represents a motivational factor to continue voicing their importance, building on our own stories and experiences. One of the important stories and lessons learned from the past relates to Mr. van der Stoel, the first OSCE High Commissioner on National Minorities. We remember Mr. van der Stoel dearly for his particular engagement in improving interethnic relations in our country. It was upon his vision and initiative that the Southeast European University was established in 2001 in Tetovo, North Macedonia. We still remember his positive vision to have this town where different ethnicities, cultures, and languages coexisted for centuries, to be the home of an important multilingual university, a place for growth, and a symbol of the importance of nurturing dialogue and embracing diversity. I would like to pay tribute to his selfless dedication to this cause and legacy. At the same time as we are marking this important milestone, 30 years of the opening of the HCNM office in The Hague, I would like to commend the commitment and engagement of all his successors for their efforts in improving the position of national minorities in the OSCE's participating states. On this occasion, I would like to offer to the incumbent HCNM Abrakmanov, my dear friend Kairat, our words of high esteem and appreciation for his tireless agency, and reaffirm our support to this valuable institution and its important mandate, focusing on early warning and calls for early action. After all, today we can all see and understand the critical importance of conflict prevention as we witness immense human suffering and intolerance. We must continue preventing conflicts, promoting peace and cooperation. We owe that to the OSCE as well as to the people for whom this organization exists. With this in mind, on our end, and as people-oriented chairpersonship, we will continue offering solutions and answers to today's triggers and challenges across the OSCE space. For our own region, based on the OSCE comprehensive concept of security, I have offered our own plan to engage in trust building and reconciliation, combating corruption, and in light of today's conferences, mitigating climate change. My latest concrete initiative, the so-called CIO roadmap for de-escalation of recent tensions in Kosovo, is a product of this engagement towards peace that could provide further normalization and peaceful coexistence. Ladies and gentlemen, minority rights are integral to achieving stability, democracy, and prosperity within the OSCE region. As history has shown, neglecting these rights can lead to social fragmentation, discrimination, and even conflict. That is why it is essential for the OSCE to continue advocating for minority rights and fostering an environment of tolerance, inclusivity, and understanding. The inherent significance of these words, more like values, should be the compass that should lead us forward through turbulent waters. The strong currents should not deter us from our commitment to these values and the people relying on the OSCE. I thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Minister. It's now my pleasure to invite the Secretary General of the OSCE, Her Excellency Helga Maria Schmidt, to say a few words. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, colleagues, distinguished guests. It is a real pleasure to join you this afternoon, and I'm grateful to the High Commissioner, whose outstanding work I would like to appreciate right at the beginning, and grateful to the Chair for organizing this very timely event. And of course, it's always a pleasure to see the EU Special Representative, Miroslav Lajčák. Also warm welcome to Vienna. We have heard this year marks indeed the 3 decades since the work of the OSCE High Commissioner on National Minorities began. Since then, thousands of dedicated OSCE colleagues have worked in close cooperation with host countries, civil society, and international partners to foster long-term social cohesion in Southeastern Europe. This is work that we, as the OSCE family, can be truly proud of. One of the key advantages the OSCE provides in the region is our field presence. We are on the ground in countries across Southeastern Europe, and not only in capitals, but in communities as well. This local engagement helps us build trust among communities. Trust is a key element in building strong, resilient societies. When we can build trust, we can mitigate conflict and improve the prospects for sustainable peace and prosperity. Engaging with local communities and national authorities to promote dialogue and foster social cohesion has formed the bedrock of the OSCE's engagement in Southeastern Europe since 1992. It remains a cornerstone of our work as we support governments in their efforts to build more equal and inclusive societies, societies that protect minority rights and support the active political participation of minority communities. Key areas of the OSCE's work include ensuring a good understanding of challenges faced by minorities, support to their participation in public life, efforts related to education, and enhanced economic opportunities. We know that we can only reduce inequality when we understand the situation minorities face. Last year, the Office of the High Commissioner, in cooperation with the OSCE's Gender Issues Programme, WIN, carried out a baseline study on the situation of minority women. The study identified key challenges faced by women from a minority background. It outlined good practices in promoting full and equal participation of minority women in public life and in countering discrimination. We also produced a set of recommendations to protect the rights of minority women. Through this, we helped provide participating states in the region with the tools necessary to facilitate the participation of minority women in processes to ensure peace and security, as well as their access to economic and social rights. Another important avenue of work relates to how strategies and legislation can support the participation of minorities in public life. And here we work together with the High Commissioner in assessing and analyzing relevant legislation when it comes to legal frameworks relevant to national minorities, or we work together in the development of national minority laws that can be a model for the rest of the country, as we have done, for example, in the development of the Brčko district law in Bosnia-Herzegovina. I could give many more examples, but I don't want to be too long. Just to say, and just to mention another avenue for supporting long-term social cohesion, and this is education. Education can help build social ties between groups and create economic opportunities for members of national minorities. The OSCE has worked to boost minority access to and participation in higher education, particularly in languages of national minorities, in order to leverage education as a tool for social cohesion. Building social cohesion also requires generating economic opportunities for disadvantaged groups, helping them to overcome disparities in living standards between communities. The OSCE, through the Office of the Coordinator of OSCE Economic and Environmental Activities, helps expand opportunities for the region's youth, improving employment prospects by helping them develop innovative skills that support green startups through the YDA's project. Finally, 30 years since the first commissioner took office, the success of the OSCE's work and its impact on the lives of people across the region is clear. The combination of the role of the High Commissioner, along with the OSCE's strong network of field operations, excellent partnerships with host countries, local level engagement, and the ability to partner with civil society and youth provides a key tool to support social cohesion and foster positive, sustainable change for the people of Southeastern Europe. Continuous engagement across societies and between communities has and will continue to deliver meaningful results that benefit us all. So thank you, dear Karat. And again, my congratulations to you and to your whole team. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General. Now I would like to give the floor to the OSCE High Commissioner on National Minorities, His Excellency Karat Abdurrahmanov. Dear High Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Honorable Chairman, Minister Osmani, Secretary General Schmidt, Special Representative Lajcak, my dear friends, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone present at today's conference as we prepare to reflect on lessons learned from 3 decades of conflict prevention work carried out by 6 High Commissioners on national minorities within the OSCE area. Let me also express my gratitude to the 2023 Chairpersonship of North Macedonia and to the permanent delegation of the Republic of North Macedonia for graciously co-organizing this event together with my office. Today, we will highlight the conflict prevention work of the OSCE High Commission on National Minorities during the course of the last 3 decades. We will also discuss the current role of the HCNM in contemporary security architecture, and we will examine lessons learned and emerging challenges. I am therefore honored to have the following distinguished guests with us today for this discussion. I'm thankful to the Minister Bujar Osmani for his introductory statement. For Secretary General, dear Helga, thank you so much. And of course, we are so privileged today to have with us EU Special Representative for the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue and other Western Balkan regional issues, Miroslav Lajcak. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the appointment of the first High Commissioner and of the HCNM office opening its doors in The Hague. Therefore, before we begin, I would like to take a moment to thank all of you here today for your unwavering support and cooperation over the last 3 decades, a period during which 6 successive High Commissioners have continuously engaged with the participating states in execute their unique conflict prevention mandate. As you are all well aware, in 1992, the OSCE participating states created the position of the High Commission on National Minorities to address tensions involving national minority issues in response to what they termed the challenges of change. When Max van der Stoel, prominent Dutch statesman, took office as the first High Commissioner, he was immediately challenged by several wars that resulted in the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives. He addressed those challenges with innovative approaches based on quiet diplomacy. In the decades that followed, as the security landscape in the OSCE evolved, tensions involving national minorities continued to be a relevant factor in conflict prevention. In response to this, successive High Commissioners further refined and adjusted the engagement. Unfortunately, today we are facing our own challenges of change, as the dynamics of peace and security have been dramatically transformed within the OSCE region. The 30th anniversary therefore presents us with a timely opportunity to highlight the 3 decades on conflict prevention work of the High Commissioners, to discuss the role of the HCNM in the current context, and to examine lessons learned and emerging challenges. The HCNM's 30th anniversary also coincides with North Macedonia, a long term of the HCNM serving as the OSCE chair. While presenting the priorities for the 2023 Chairpersonship before the OSCE Permanent Council, Your Excellency, dear Minister, underlined their goal to initiate and support discussions on the importance of social inclusion and integration as values and means in achieving a durable and substantive social cohesion. North Macedonia is not only a multi-ethnic democracy, but also one of the HCNM's earliest and most actively engaged partners, with decades of considerable achievements in the area of protecting minority rights. I am therefore delighted that the North Macedonia Chairpersonship has kindly organized this conference, as together we will aim to highlight joint efforts towards exemplary long-term conflict prevention, including as demonstrated through their leadership and example. The Office of the High Commissioner on National Minorities has worked closely with the authorities of North Macedonia, as well as the OSCE mission in Skopje over many years. Having visited North Macedonia several times already as the High Commissioner, I can attest to many considerable achievements, including in the area of protecting minority rights, which I hope will serve as a source of inspiration for all OSCE participating states. Using quiet diplomacy, successive High Commissioners have continuously engaged in dialogue with national authorities and local stakeholders within the OSCE participating states to help them develop policies and relevant legislation that will incorporate the interests of national minority communities within their diverse societies. We are therefore grateful to our panelists who will provide us with informed insights on how to build long-term social cohesion in the OSCE region based on the best practices for successful integration, as well as critical reflections and new perspectives. Unfortunately, we continue to witness the spread of nationalist populism. This is a worldwide topic of concern, requiring continued and reinvigorated efforts by the HCNM to prevent conflict related to national minority issues from escalating, as was foreseen 30 years ago. Minority identities as well as minority rights continue to be portrayed as disintegrating element in society or as a security problem. Along with the increasing use of inflammatory language in mainstream political discourse, hate speech and hate crimes against national minorities are on the rise, paving the way to further marginalization. And these developments are exacerbated by the additional challenges posed by modern technology. Although the current situation is complex, I am convinced that the OSCE, as the world's largest security organization, is best suited to address today's challenges. Furthermore, with the support of the participating states and international partners, the HCNM can play a pivotal role in restoring peace and security in relation to matters pertaining to national minorities. I therefore look forward to today's discussion and to gaining insights from your perspectives and lessons learned. Your observations will enable me and future High Commissioners to tackle emerging challenges within the new security landscape of the OSCE area. As the OSCE participating states observed when they first created the position of High Commissioner on National Minorities, this is a time of instability and insecurity, but we can also be a time of promise. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, High Commissioner. And now, dear guests, to deliver the keynote speech, it is my honor to give the floor to the EU Special Representative for the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue and other Western Balkan regional issues, His Excellency Miroslav Lajcak. I'm confident that the Special Representative Lajcak does not require a special introduction in light of his extensive diplomatic career, both domestically in Slovakia and abroad in multilateral settings, as well as working in Southeastern Europe and beyond. Special Representative Lajcak, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, Mr. Chair, dear Bujar, Madam Secretary General, dear Helga, High Commissioner, dear Kairat, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. It is an honor to be here with you today to celebrate the 30th anniversary of an institution that after 3 decades of its existence did not lose any of its uniqueness or relevance. Looking back at the past 30 years, I can say that my personal and professional history is intimately linked to the HCNM as a Slovak, as a diplomat, and as former OSCE chairperson in office. In various capacities, I had the privilege to meet and work with each of the eminent high commissioners. Each of them embodies diversity. Each of them have been adding their building blocks to conflict prevention. Each of them have shaped and still shape multilateralism and peace. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, we are living in a time of great paradoxes. Technology is making our world smaller, but we are growing apart at a rapid speed. We never had more means of communication, but we talk to each other less and less. Living standards are on the rise, but so are inequalities and divisions between us. Information is accessible anywhere, anytime, but confusion and misinformation are spreading. The paradox of our times is that the world is increasingly interconnected, while at the same time the international community and multilateral institutions have become more fragmented. And what is much worse, after a surge of internal strife at the heart of our societies over the past decades, interstate war has shaken Europe again. As today is about lessons learned, I would like to offer 4. Number 1, preventive diplomacy works. When establishing the Office of the High Commissioner on National Minorities, we decided to try something different. Instead of only reacting to the consequences of conflict after it had already broken out, we aspired to act before it's too late. So we created an institution that would help us to move from response to prevention, from focusing on the effects of conflict to exploring the drivers of peace. Because history taught us that tensions often rise because of grievances experienced by some, whether due to religion, ethnicity, or gender. It taught us that when people feel excluded, treated unfairly, or discriminated, those feelings can easily turn into violence. And that often this can even further accelerated by inequality or lack of opportunity. We came a long way in preventing ethnic tensions since the beginning of this institution. It is true that the contribution of this office, due to the nature of its work, often goes unnoticed, but that does not make it any less important. Through extensive travels, discreet under-the-radar diplomacy, and long discussions with all parts of societies, the High Commissioner detected and addressed early signs of tensions or conflicts. He or she heard the trembles on the ground and saw the warning lights flashing. This is exactly in accordance with the words of High Commissioner Ekeus, who said, and I quote, "The key to preventive diplomacy is to respond to the warning signs before they ignite. The challenge is to prevent rather than manage an unstable situation," end quote. And today, 30 years later, we need this kind of preventive diplomacy more than ever. Because as simple as it is, there can never be enough. We still spend more time responding instead of preventing. But prevention can save lives, and it can save money. Addressing the meeting of the Councils of Ministers for Foreign Affairs of the CSCE in Rome in 1993, Max van der Stoel famously said, I quote, "Capital invested in conflict prevention is capital well spent. In humanitarian, financial, and political terms, conflict prevention is much cheaper than peacekeeping or rebuilding societies after a violent conflict," end quote. This axiom is as true today as it was 30 years ago. Our active mandates, High Commissioner Kairat, have never been so meaningful and relevant. Mine as the EU Special Representative and the EU Facilitator for Belgrade-Pristina dialogue resonates well with your mandate as High Commissioner. Your mandate has a twofold mission. First, to try to contain and de-escalate tensions involving national minority issues, which could lead to violent conflict, in particular international conflict. And second, to alert the OSCE whenever such tensions threaten to develop to a level at which you would not be able to contain them with the means at your disposal. This corresponds well with my mandate. The ongoing tensions between Kosovo and Serbia illustrate the pertinence of this twofold approach. And I would add a third approach, which in my current capacity is of capital importance: to build alliances beyond one's institution, to alert beyond one's institution, and to find remedies beyond one's institution. Building partnerships and devising joint policies and measures for greater impact is key. And so is the need for dialogue, especially at times of geopolitical polarization. As we know, there are still crises happening because of inter-ethnic tensions, not far from where we are meeting today. And political and religious intolerance is rising more than before. This is the reality, and we need to deal with it. We are all here because we want to solve the security challenges in our neighborhood. This means reaction, mediation, and preventive diplomacy. And it means equipping the Office of the High Commissioner with the tools it needs. This brings me to my second point. Dialogue is needed more than ever. As you have heard me saying in these very halls many times before, one of the key ingredients to success in diplomacy is dialogue. And here I mean real dialogue. I have to be honest, we are not seeing enough of it. Too often, we are pretending to have a real conversation while sticking to our own positions and red lines. We prefer to criticize those who think differently instead of trying to understand their point of view, and we call it dialogue. But it is not. Real dialogue is a lot harder. It requires openness to listen, to compromise, to interact, and to self-reflect. Way too often, this openness is missing. The High Commissioner is trying to change this pattern by providing a safe space for real dialogue on the ground between elected leaders and representatives of non-majority communities, between civil society and religious figures, between people with different backgrounds. This is so important because our societies in Europe are multi-ethnic. It is what defines and unites us. But with this diversity in culture, religion, and ethnicity, all tensions and friction lines never fully disappear. Dialogue with each other, between and within countries, societies, and peoples is a process that needs nourishing. And dialogue is also at the core of my current work, the dialogue on normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia. As reflected by the current situation in North Kosovo, the lack of inclusive policies aimed at managing diversity and enhancing social cohesion result in alienating even more the non-majority populations who in turn do not recognize the legitimacy of the government. High Commissioner Echoes described it well in 2003 when he said, I quote, "The basic philosophy is that a society at peace with itself will more likely be at peace with its neighbors. Thus, it will contribute to regional stability and create the conditions for prosperity." And he went on to say, "The integration of diversity offers a way to ensure human rights, both of the majority and of minorities, and thereby to build more stable and harmonious societies. In this way, integration is a powerful means to overcome inter-ethnic tensions." My third point today is about integration, and I named it, there is always a choice between integration and division. Fittingly, this 30-year anniversary coincides with North Macedonia chairing this organization. As we are here today to highlight good examples, I believe North Macedonia is one of those. As Mahatma Gandhi once said, I quote, "The future depends on what you do today," end quote. And this is what North Macedonia did yesterday, for today, and tomorrow. Addressing students of what is known today as the Stuhl University in Tetovo back in 2013, High Commissioner Volebek said, I quote, "What you do today will shape your country of tomorrow. One of the main issues you will have to address is the inter-ethnic situation. The stability and prosperity of your country depends on how this is managed. You are at the crossroads. On one side, you have a path towards integration, peace, and stability. And on the other side, you have the road to division and separation," end quote. Southeastern Europe, so rich in its ethnic diversity, is still grappling with the demons of its past. And far too often, it chooses division over integration. This has to change. It is on us not to allow the past to overshadow the present. And it is on us not to allow it to shape our future. Coming back to my current work, the dialogue on normalization between Kosovo and Serbia, I'd like to quote the esteemed former High Commissioner Thors, who said, "It is the responsibility of states to provide security for citizens, to protect human rights, and to ensure good and effective governance," end quote. It is in that spirit of integration and good governance that the establishment of an association or community of Serb majority municipalities in Kosovo is intended to create a trusted relationship between Kosovo Serbs and the government of Kosovo, to allow for continued support of the government of Serbia in an agreed manner, and to ensure that municipalities can work together for the Kosovo Serb community to develop and thrive. And while it is still a long way to go, I'm confident we will get there. There is always a choice, and choosing integration over separation is truly European. It is what the office we are celebrating today has been promoting since the beginning. And we need to see more of it in our own countries and in our neighborhood. Dear colleagues, my last point today is about working together. It's about more multilateralism, not less. And here I don't want just to make another call for more cooperation. Instead, I want to make the case for why it makes sense. I don't think multilateralism has ever brought us down the wrong path. Instead, our mistakes have come from acting alone or in our own exclusive alliances. So when we discuss our European security challenges, we cannot forget that one main solution is right in front of us. As a former chair, I know very well that the OSCE holds a lot of potential. It has the tools, the institutions, and its missions to find the solutions we need. But this organization is only as strong as we allow it to be. And all the right instruments cannot substitute for what is lacking. We need common political vision, courage, and a renewed commitment to the organization. Because multilateralism is not only for the common good, but it can also help us to solve the individual challenges we face. Excellencies, dear colleagues, we are here today to learn from the past for a better future. What was true 30 years ago is still true today. The recipe lies on focusing and shaping effective prevention, on empowering young people to effect greater impact for future generations, and on fostering effective multilateralism as the cement of our connectivity and our common welfare. It is never too late to learn, exchange, and engage in dialogue. And as long as we talk, it can only help us to move this organization and this institution forward. Throughout my career, I have advocated for dialogue, strengthening multilateralism, and the need to serve all people. So my lessons for us all learned after 30 years of the High Commission of National Minorities are more focus on prevention, return to real and genuine dialogue, better integration of diverse societies, and recommitment to multilateralism. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We are grateful to you for your participation here today and for your insightful words. Your messages and those of all the participants and the speakers of this panel have now set the stage for the next part of our program, the panel discussion. First, though, I would like to invite everyone to enjoy a short coffee break just outside these doors. We will reconvene in 15 minutes. Also, a very short video will be shown after the coffee break, for which you will need the headphones which are provided. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the second part of our event today. My name is Marek Szczygieł. I am director in the Office of the High Commissioner on National Minorities, and I will have the pleasure to moderate this panel discussion with the group of distinguished eminent panelists who will present their perspectives on the topic of this discussion, which is building long-term social cohesion, experiences on integration, critical reflections, and new perspectives for the region. Before we start our discussion, we would like to invite you to watch a short video that is dedicated to the FRAZA project that we launched together with our partners almost exactly 1 year ago. And this FRAZA project is basically a phrase book with 4 languages that is expanded phrase book that is support to be a part of policies aimed at overcoming language barriers and providing individuals in diverse societies, such as the one in North Macedonia. So it provides individuals with the necessary tools in order to facilitate communication with each other and to bridge linguistic barriers. So I would invite you to use your headphones in order to see this video, please. Thank you very much. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our distinguished panelists. I will start from my left side with Mr. Robert Alagiozowski, National Coordinator for Interculturalism, One Society, Cultural Development and Intersector Cooperation. Mr. Alagiozowski is also a long-term friend of our institution. We cooperate closely with him, but he has been also in charge of the process of drafting and then implementing the national strategy for the development of the One Society concept and interculturalism. In 2017, 2018, he served as a Minister of Culture. Previously, he has worked as a publisher, translator, and manager of numerous projects related to cultural diversity, post-conflict reconciliation, and artistic activism. He holds a master's degree in literary studies and has completed work towards a PhD in cultural management. He is also the author of a number of books, dozens of studies, influential essays, and reviews. And as I mentioned already, he has been engaged in several HCNM-related activities and events, most notably as a speaker during the 10th anniversary of the Ljubljana recommendations, say we recall. Then I would like to welcome Professor Begetti, who is rector of the Southeastern European University in Tetovo. He's an academician and full professor of public finance and macroeconomics at the Faculty of Business and Economics at this Southeast European University in the Republic of North Macedonia. Professor Begetti has published a number of books and co-authored also some other, including a number of scientific papers and analysis, as well as articles in different newspapers. During the period 1996-1998, Professor Begetti was appointed as Minister for Development and later a Minister for Transportation and Communication. He's also a full member of the Macedonian Academy of Science. From 2018, Professor Begetti is director of the Southeast European University in Tetovo, and also recently, as I understand, president of the Inter-University Conference in the Republic of North Macedonia. Now turning to Ms. Nina Somolainen, whom you might know from her top managerial functions in the OSCE. Right now, she's senior manager at the Matti Ahtisaari Peace Foundation in Finland, but is also international expert in crisis management and institutional development professional. She has served in senior leadership positions in OSCE field operations and in other international organizations. Between 2015 and 2018, Ms. Somolainen served as head of mission at OSCE mission to Skopje. Before that, as deputy head of mission to OSCE mission to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Recently, she held executive position of the executive director at Justice Rapid Response, focusing on international investigations of war crimes and serious human rights violations globally. She was also head of the ODIHR election observation missions in Bulgaria and in Montenegro, but also spent some time in the office of the High Commissioner on National Minorities during Finnish chairmanship. Now on my right, I would like to introduce Dr. Petra Roter, professor of international relations at the University of Ljubljana in Slovenia, and also member and president of the advisory committee on the Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities of the Council of Europe. Dr. Roter is professor of international relations at the University of Ljubljana, where she teaches undergraduate and postgraduate courses on, among others, international protection of minorities, international protection of human rights, international conflict management, ethic, diversity management, and research seminar in international relations. She is also a member of the Max van der Stoel Award Selection Committee, and we are very happy also to cooperate with Dr. Roter on a number of thematic issues related to the recommendations that our office produced. So she has participated in the drafting of several such documents, but also not only for the HCNM, but also a number of so-called soft law documents for the Council of Europe. She has contributed also her independent expertise to national policy development in several countries on diversity management, minority rights, and inclusive education. Then we have our good friend and long-term collaborator, Mr. Christoph Birwirt, who is the head of the UNHCR liaison office here in Vienna to the OSCE and other Vienna-based UN agencies since 1st of September 2018. And in parallel, Christoph is serves as one of the co-moderators of the working group within the Geneva international discussions. I had the pleasure to work closely with him in my previous capacity. Among his previous assignments, I would like to mention his work in Armenia as the UNHCR representative, but also his work in Georgia as deputy representative of the UNHCR. He is a lawyer by education and also worked previously in Ukraine and at the headquarters of in Geneva. With this introduction, I would like to invite our panelists to deliver their presentations, and we will start from my left side with Mr. Robert Alagiozowski, who will refer also to the project that we just presented, this phrasebook Fraza, but also will kick off with some reflections related to the national perspective, work on the ground, and experience of working with the institution of the High Commissioner on National Minorities. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marek. Your Excellencies, dear panelists, it's a great pleasure to be here and to share our experience with the work on building long-term social cohesion. So I was very glad to hear the speeches of our distinguished eminences, and they, in a way, liberate me from the wider political framework and the political vision that I so passionately share with them. And I will speak in the next few minutes more concretely on our experience, results, learned lessons, and the challenges that we have to address in the future. Of course, that does not mean that there shouldn't be a vision involved, because actually, when we are speaking about social cohesion, when we are speaking about the values of diversity, it means that this is all about the mindset, it's about the worldview, it's about the values that we share. You cannot be efficient technocrat or bureaucrat who is going to implement some policy without strongly believing in it. And then we come to the so-called political will, which is very much important to implement efficient policies. Our experience was that we find out back in 2017 that many of the projects of the separate strategies of the different action plans for building social cohesion and intercultural dialogue was pretty much either neglected or producing only short-term results that were immediately forgot. Because of that, we have made some studies, and then we consulted all the international reports that were saying that the division and the gap among the communities in North Macedonia are pretty deep, and that the communities are not sharing their common vision for the future of the country, and this is a dangerous situation. So for us, this was a motivation to step forward and to think of an integration policy that will, in a way, bridge these gaps and will increase the intercultural dialogue in the country. So we created the 3-year strategy that we call a strategy for one society and interculturalism. And within, we establish different actions, and we identify very specifically where the problems are in the society. Well, we work very closely with the international partners, with the Office of the High Commissioners, first and foremost, but then also with the field mission of Skopje, also with Council of Europe bodies, to address the burning issue. Well, one of the key elements to the result that the action must be central, and that our strategy was coming from the government and also from the cabinet of the Prime Minister, and it was going into dozens of ministries and agencies and other institutions that were created to address the rights of the community, but also the elements of intercultural dialogue. So we tailored actions that were increasing the capacities of all these institutions to work properly and to meet the demands of different communities, but also to address, as I said, the issue of division and separation. So we went into different fields, and we dare to be ambitious in our role. So we address the gaps in the educational field, in the stereotypes, in the teach books and history books that were actually producing a mononational or monocommunal view, and even a lot of stereotypes across not only gender, but also ethnicities. So we revised these textbooks, and we are in a progress of producing new ones. Also, we considered that the teachers, it's not only about the textbooks, but it's also about the teachers who are going to taught the students on the different perspectives. So we organized teachings and trainings for them as well. We went into the youth actions and the Agency for Youth and Sport and the Ministry of Culture, and then different agencies. We developed special project calls and project lines that were, in a way, stimulating and giving grants for projects that were not only dealing with community rights and actions reflecting different smaller communities, but also on increasing the intercultural cooperation amongst them. Of course, the huge issues that were produced, that were addressed, were the issues like the hate speech, and then the, in a way, mono perspectives in the news reporting, and then we increased and we supported the work and the capacities of different media and journalistic networks that were taking care of combating hate speech and eliminating stereotypes and the monoperspectiveness of how they present the news or the narratives, the success or the failure stories, also attaching to the community affairs. Well, as I said, Fraza is one of these outputs that we created. We noticed that for quite a lot of time people who don't like to be intercultural, they always find perfect excuses. So they say, oh, we would gladly speak Turkish or Albanian or Roma or Serbian, other smaller languages, but they say we don't have how. We don't have time to go to additional lectures or lessons. And then, of course, we find these tools, so that the digital tools, the technological tools, the technology should be used even in intercultural affairs, because it can really bring results. Now it's so easy to communicate and then to really show that we care about the plurilanguage situation in our country. But then when we have built our social cohesion, we didn't only care about the rights of the smaller communities, because we didn't want also to cause the effect that now the majority will feel, as usually the ethno-nationalist speaks and narrative goes, that now the rights of the majority are neglected. It's often an excuse that is used, so that we also proposed, and now it's under adoption, a new law on strengthening the use and the capacities of the Macedonian language, which is the first spoken and the official language on the country, so that all the media, all the public institutions would more specifically care about nurturing and use of a proper official language as well. While saying this, we also have to have in mind that however we work steadily on the question of long-term social cohesion, this is a field which can very easily deteriorate. The challenges and the identity-based discourses are so much used by different power structures that would like to have their own agendas, and always whatever you have achieved in the 5 or 6 or 10 years can easily deteriorate. Because of that, I think that it is very important that we work all the time in a process, and all the time with lively, alerted and capacity building institutions that will constantly improve their capacities. And because of that, it's very important to work in close cooperation with the international network and the multilateral bodies, as it is the High Commissioner Office, and it is OSCE and other bodies. And because of that, even when you have a project or strategic cycles, now let's say in North Macedonia, we are in between the two strategies, but when we have living institutions, we can address emerging questions. And let's say these questions are now these special social networks that are these fake news factories that are easily and quite a lot working in the area of interethnic relationships. Luckily, we are alerted, and let's say we work with a lot of NGOs from the field that are actually contesting and this fake news, and they are providing the fact-checking evidence, and they are providing the right stories behind the falsified ones. So in the period of the crisis, as we were, it is that these challenges and the structure that is actually putting the security of Europe and the whole world back in danger, then producing fake news, especially in the minorities discourse, is very strong, and this should concern us all, and we should work together to share our experience how to eliminate. Referring back to our cooperation with the High Commissioner Office, I would say it was fruitful, and they supported us constantly, not only with the quiet diplomacy and the all presence and detailed cooperation and field visits, but also with helping us with the technical support, and also with offering us their pool of experts that were giving us recommendation, and they were revising our strategic and action plan, and they were always working with us closely on the issues, which were sometimes even more than what we can anticipate it. So I would stop here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you for your words of appreciation with regards to our support and our bilateral cooperation. I think it is a very valid point that you mentioned with regard to the potential implications of hate speech in inter-ethnic relations, but also the importance of well-functioning institutions. Now I would like to turn to Professor Begetti, Abdelmanaf Begetti, Rector of the Southeastern European University in Tetovo. This institution is very closely linked with the history of HCNM. Basically, it was during the late 90s when the very first High Commissioner, Max van der Stoel, proposed the idea of launching internationally recognized university and higher education center of excellence in Tetovo with clear European integration. So now, Professor Begetti, we can see the fruits of this initiative in this well-functioning university institution. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador Marek. Dear participants, Your Excellency, Ambassador Kairat, dear panelists, almost all previous speakers as a high representatives here in this panel mentioned about the project Southeast Europe University establishing since 2001. I just want to underline that a year ago, we made a monography, 20 years of university, where is described the historical background of that project that we consider as a most fruitful project in region of Southeast Europe University, as a concrete project with a huge contribution. Thanks to that time, as was mentioned, the very, let's say, bright idea to find a solution to increase the access of Albanians, first of all, in higher education area. It was not possible to study in their own language. And fortunately came the idea from first High Commissioner for National Minorities, Mr. Max van der Stoel, who not just increased the idea, but he ran the project since 2007, actively ran the project, developed the project, not on just in infrastructure terms, but as well in the institutional capacity building. The project was very successful. At that time, he has been in the same time the first president of our International Board of Trustees at the university, which has two main roles: lead the university, developing university, and bring university very sustainable. And of course, the main role is electing the rector of the university. And that kind of project that was unique at that time really contribute a lot at the time that we been in the civil war in 2001. Can you imagine in such a dividing of society to have an initiative to bring all different ethnical background people in the same classrooms, in the same university, and not only them, but also all employees to respect each other in huge and big tolerance interculturally, which is become a unique in that aspect. Southeast Europe University is even today practicing 3 languages in teaching, but not only teaching. Also, we say there flexible use of languages, practicing every day in all our working bodies and structure. So Dean's Office, Rectorate, Senate, and all other bodies at university. Each academic member and administration is speaking his own language. And the answer is coming in the own language of others. Everybody understand each other, speaking their own language, but without the translation. We want and we try to promote this project in wide perspective of country, but not only, especially in the region. If a person finds himself in the center of Tetovo, my hometown, and takes a taxi and asks to go to Southeast Europe University, even today, 22 years later, the taxi driver will not look at him and understand in each direction want to go. But if you are saying to the taxi driver, I want to go to the Stuhl University, then it's a well understanding where you want to go. So today I am proud to say that the legacy of the Commissioner Stuhl and all our international friends from the international community help establishing our university continues and becomes stronger with each passing days. When CEU was established, represent as a unique dimension, not only in terms of languages, but also in terms of governance and managing, in terms of being protected from political influence, as I mentioned, because we have this kind of governance structure that was originally established by Commissioner Max van der Stoel. It was a bright idea, understanding the situation that always in our regions, politicians want to interfere in any segment of the society, and especially in universities. So bringing a specific, let's say, protection umbrella as an international board, they do not allow to interfering. And I'm very happy that I am leading a university that we are unique, being very, very independent in that aspect. I have to say that university today is much more even support and by government dotation, partially about 20% of our budget is coming from the government as a university private, not for profit. And all this support is going to be allocated for scholarship for new students that allow us to attract the successful students and promoting to them possibility to learn in their own languages. Nowadays, after 22 years, that came to the stage that we have a mixed ethnical background students following the lectures in the same room in English. Slowly, university become to be real international in terms of one language, having in classroom many students with different ethnical background, not just Albanians and Macedonians as the two biggest, let's say, ethnical groups, but also Turks, Romas, Serbs, and all others in the same room. And this is functioning very well. So I may say that we are developing unique in terms of having all these institutions, capacity buildings, quality system at university, and of course, having other possibility for students like technology park inside of university, where students can be employed, can be internship doing and practicing. In terms of taking part about the social impact of the institution, we are specific because since 15 years ago, we developed at university as a climate action plan and established since that time the solar panels, producing renewable energy for ourselves. Today, there are many of them, but 15 years ago, it was really very rare. Based on that climate action plan for reducing CO2 at that aspect. In same time, I may see that today we are taking a lot consideration about the principles or standards ESG, So environmental, social, and government standards, and practicing the different study programs considering the impact to the society. Different study programs has been developed, like it's one from 2 years ago we call EEE, economy, ecology, and energy, which is interdisciplinary program and is very likely for the new generation to be part of that. CEU built cohesion between different group of people, and the culture diversification requires a lot energy and, of course, finance. But all these sacrifice are nothing and very much cheaper compared to the benefits from that. So understand the government, and current government understand this role, and they are supporting us, as I mentioned, more and more from day to day. And university is becoming more sustainable. The employability rate of our students is 75% after 3 months of their graduation. And imagine how is high the rate of employability in the country having unemployment rate 18 or 17%. So in such a very high unemployment rate, to have such an employability, this is a huge, let's say, impact to the economy and country. I want to close this presentation of my university with quoting the words of His Excellency Max van der Stoel, who, addressing the role of OSCE in the conflict prevention, that time said, citation open, "Behind interethnic tensions, there are often other, deeper causes of conflicts. If people are unemployed, if they have a little or no possibility for education, if no decent housing is available, if the prospect for their children's future are gloomy, it is no wonder that they are dissatisfied. And as a consequence of that, will come to the conflict." In the case of the CEU, High Commissioner Stoel can rest in peace that he has created a legacy that has ensured a secure perspective for numerous young people who, thanks to him and OSCE, have received incredible possibility for high quality education and have been able to enjoy the student's life in modern campus dormitories, have developed skills that increase their chance for employment in the country, and not only, but also in beyond. Until now, university has enrolled more than 30,000 students, graduated being 16,000. Currently, you have 5,000 students in very different 6 faculties and 30 study programs, as well 5,000 students that are already temporarily leave the university and gone to the labor market because they have been prepared before being graduated. So we are proud, and I may say that this success story have to be disseminated and have to be promoted, because that is a real solution in offering the alternative for young people there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Begetti, for this very impressive and encouraging overview of the current development of the Southeastern European University in Tetovo, which is visible and living legacy of the first High Commissioner Max van der Stoel, and is also probably perfect example of well invested money that bring very effective inter-ethnic communication, but also bring benefits for entire local society. So this is very encouraging to hear your voices and your voice, and we are very happy to cooperate very closely with the Tetovo University. Now I would like to invite Nina Sumolainen to reflect on her perspective with regards to the role of OSCE in the region. I think it goes without saying that HCNM is not working in isolation, but in close collaboration with field missions active in the region. And this is very positive experience of this work where we can explore synergies, where we can achieve common results. And from the perspective of HCNM, this is definitely something that we would like to continue. This is indispensable part of our work. Nina, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marek. Thank you very much, Marek, and thank you very much for the for inviting me to be part of this panel, distinguished panel here today. And good afternoon, all participants and representatives of delegations. Indeed, I had the opportunity to serve as the head of mission for the OSCE mission in Skopje in 2015 to 2018. And the work of the mission was very much since its establishment was focusing on supporting the implementation of the Ohrid Framework Agreement of 2001, as you well know. And our mandate then really was focusing on the cornerstone for participation of all ethnic communities in political, social, and cultural life. So in all parts or segments in the society. And I believe this is something which is very remarkable, because I strongly believe that one cannot distinguish only one area to work with national minorities. Let's say sometimes that, oh, we have to support the cultural or social activities of minorities. But fine, that's good to do also. But I think it has to be a wider perspective for sure. And the mandate of the Skopje mission and the Ohrid Framework Agreement in a way recognize this very importantly. And in fact, also the High Commissioner's mandate. So as a first field, I would like to take up the equal access to political life and to rule of law, because, you know, in any society, citizens cannot be fully part of the society if they don't have also equal representation, equal access in political life of the country. And we, in Mission to Skopje, there were different modalities to try to support such participation and equal representation. I personally was just in Montenegro heading the ODA election observation mission. For example, there are special measures in the election system to allow that the minorities will be able to be getting access to seats in the parliament. They are actually in the law. In my own country, in Finland, we have we don't have specific such specific mechanisms for national minorities. However, for example, Åland Islands, they always have one seat reserved in the parliament. And also in our country, it's a practice that the Swedish National Party almost always is part of the government. So I think this is something which is very important to recognize and implement, both either in legal ways or actually in concrete implementation. Then second topic, a very important issue is the linguistic rights. And of course, it really sometimes, or in fact, it's a cornerstone for the cultural identity of national minorities all over the world, really. And very often, you know, it's one of the most important things which national minorities say, that access to our own language, education in our own language, as for example, now was promoted and is still promoted in Southeastern European University. And in a way, it's a question of survival of the specific nature and features of the national minority, the use of your own language in the society. it can also be very practical things. For example, access to services in your own language. Let's say we have elderly people who might not really be fully functional anymore in their second language, or in schools in lower level, really when children go to school, to be able to do this in your own language. This is very much the cornerstone for the participation of national minorities to promote that. So the right to use everywhere your own language, it's really very important, and I was happy that we also in the OSCE mission were very much supporting that. A third area is also, this is mentioned prominently in the Ohrid Framework Agreement, the decentralization. Sometimes, of course, we know that this topic might get very it becomes very sensitive, and sometimes the implementation raises many issues and many questions in different contexts, and there might be different forces, which are some pushing for more decentralization or for or more centralization, so opposite forces. However, we all know that the recipe for communities to live happier in the country, it is very important for them to be able to themselves have a say or decide on most or many or most of the issues which touch upon them. So the decentralization is an important topic, and there are many various different modalities how to implement that. And I don't think there's the only one best modality, but this is something which I'm sure the organizations supporting roles of national minorities will need to really pay attention to and promote ways to exercise decentralized governance. So there are a number of, or huge amount actually, of good modalities in the world which will provide at the same time for cohesion and also a wide array of national and minority rights. But of course, the most important thing is, and our colleague here in the panel was saying it, is really the political will. There has to be, the will by actors in the society to engage dialogue, to find joint solutions for issues. And because ultimately, obviously, it is also a question of the power, it's a question of resources, it's a question of politics. So the political will cannot for sure be overestimated in this respect. Now, so in North Macedonian context, the OSCE mission to Skopje was really supporting these mechanisms, as I already said. So the justice system, national minorities' participation in the justice system, in rule of law, in police structures. This is a very big topic and very important. Education system, equitable representation, governance, local structures, and probably many other areas. And I believe these are still the very important part of the work of the OSCE mission to Skopje. So, and one thing I want to mention, because I know there will be a colleague talking soon about that, I believe personally that it's very important to have the international legal frameworks and the conventions, such as the Framework Convention, for example. Often I have in my work, we have used actually then looked into what were the decisions by Council of Europe in this respect. And then it's easy for us to go to the country officials and say, look, it's not just us who's saying this. This is actually a wider international commitment, and there are decisions about that. So to conclude, the national minority issues cannot be looked at into separate affair. It is question of governance and public structures. It's question of political power also. And it's also crucial to have a wider perspective, not to only focus on one sector or only on one project. And it's also essential to exercise good faith in the dialogue and engage in constant and ongoing dialogue. And finally, as a last point, I want to say that as the OSCE mission to Skopje, when I was the head of mission there, I really saw the importance of working together with the institutions such as the High Commissioner's Office, because in a way it very fruitfully combines the very specific high-level expertise by the High Commissioner's Office and the operational and long-term support in country by the mission. So for the OSCE, I think I would say that the recommendation would definitely be to nurture more such cooperation, because stronger then we can better support, for example, in this case, the national minorities' role in the country. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina. Thank you for this insightful presentation and for bringing also the perspective from your home country. Nina is also active in public life as a member of the Helsinki City Council. Yes, and I find very also encouraging this call for complementarity between OSCE institutions and field missions. I think this is what we are constantly trying to achieve in our activities, in our contacts with our colleagues in the field, and this is usually mutually beneficial cooperation. So as I said, this kind of partnership should be further encouraged. And thank you also for referring to the Ohrid agreement. I think this is still perceived as a potential model for this kind of successful conflict prevention by the international efforts. So the role of the OSCE in this respect is still of paramount importance. Now I would like to turn to my right side and invite Dr. Petra Rotter, one of the most renowned experts in the field of protection of national minorities, and again our close partner. This partnership with the Council of Europe and all the relevant bodies of Council of Europe is long-lasting and is also underpinned by joint efforts to produce new documents and to reinforce, let's say, our approaches, our perspectives on specific issues related to national minorities. Dr. Rotter, please.
Thank you very much. Also, thank you very much for the invitation to be able to attend this panel, and congratulations to the High Commissioner, to your excellent team at the 30th anniversary. This year also marks the 25th anniversary since the Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities entered into force. And we had somehow a similar exchange of views between the Advisory Committee and the High Commissioner in early June. And it was not just an exchange of views, but it was also an opportunity where a collection of Council of Europe and OSCE national minority standards, a collection was prepared, made available online. And I would like to invite you all to have a look at this enormous body of documents, and also to use it in everyday practice of diversity management through minority rights. And this just in a way shows the complementarity of both institutions, whereby we in a way mutually support each other to promote diversity management through minority rights. In the collection, you will of course find instruments like the Framework Convention itself, but also many of the very frequently used guidelines and recommendations like the Ljubljana Guidelines on Integration of Diverse Societies, which your team brought a few copies with, and I took a copy myself. It's always good to have a copy somewhere nearby. That's how useful these documents are. What I would like to reflect on, we, in a way, in the advisory committee decided that we would not really celebrate this anniversary, but really reflect on it, on the past sort of achievements, but also challenges, but also with a view to looking ahead. And what I would like to do in this presentation is to focus on two broader issues. The first one being a little bit of a sort of reflection on the mandate, but not on the mandate as such, but the High Commissioner's role in the broader infrastructure or in the broader international regime for the protection of national minorities, so for diversity management through minority rights. And in this context, I would like to again reflect a bit on our mutual cooperation between the High Commissioner and his excellent team and the advisory committee and our secretariat. And then in my second part, I will briefly reflect on some of the perhaps broader issues that the region of Southeastern Europe is facing, perhaps a few challenges towards a more successful societal integration. Thinking about the first topic on the mandate and on the functioning of the international regime. What I think is very striking, 4 points I'd like to make here, is the complementarity between our recommendations, which is also something that the speaker Nina mentioned before me. So between our recommendations, which of course offer guidance, often call for effective participation of minorities, and for cooperation between the authorities and minorities to look for concrete solutions on their own. And then the High Commissioner and his team being able to really look concretely for possible solutions, possible ways of addressing these bigger challenges, the bigger sort of, in a way, to fulfill the needed changes or to make the needed changes with the view, as I said, to manage diversity through minority rights and thereby prevent discrimination, achieve equality, achieve societal integration, and of course, by implication, bring about peace and stability in the region. Then the second issue I'd like to mention is really the ongoing attention that the High Commissioner has in his mandate to issues, and that mandate really allows a rapid reaction, which is something, again, that complements and is complementary to the international regime, where if I look at the Framework Convention, of course, it's a legal instrument that provides for a 5-year cycles, whereby the advisory committee then looks at more closely and assesses, based on a very extensive country visits, assesses the situation on the ground in specific state parties. We now have 39 state parties, and the Framework Convention is also monitored through a special agreement in Kosovo, so 40 entities altogether. And whereby the advisory committee can do this assessment every 5 years, the High Commissioner can really respond very quickly to a situation that can indeed, as Robert mentioned in the beginning, that can indeed change overnight, unfortunately. So even in circumstances when you feel there is stability, there are good interethnic relations, things can be sparked and things can go wrong. And it's very important that we have an instrument that can act on the ground quickly, quietly. This is also why many of the achievements are never known, that of course are done behind the scenes. So here again, I think there is a lot of complementarity between different institutions. Then of course, my third point is that what within the regime, and looking of course from the perspective of the Framework Convention and the Advisory Committee, there are states, even member states of the Council of Europe, but also participating states of the OSCE that are not state parties to the Framework Convention. So thereby, of course, the role of the Advisory Committee is limited. And here I would like to remind everyone, of course, that the Framework Convention is also open for accession by states that are not member states of the Council of Europe. But of course, the advisory committee can play a role only in those states that are state parties. And in the broader Southeastern European region, there are some states that are yet to ratify the Framework Convention, member states of the Council of Europe. So this broader geographical region also means that there are issues and lessons that can be learned also from the regions that are not part of the Council of Europe. The Commissioner, dear Kairat, we had several exchanges on also the Central Asian region that brings an interesting and an important perspective to diversity management through minority rights. And then my fourth point is perhaps a little bit of a point of caution. The focus on preventing conflicts is in the present situation also in a way a potential challenge, or could be a potential challenge. And I think we should all avoid this challenge to somehow become the obstacle on implementing minority rights in practice. Looking at minority issues through a security perspective can suggest, and has indeed in many occasions suggested, that minorities and even minority rights, which is something we heard also in the introductory speeches this afternoon, so minority issues and minorities can be and are securitized. This sort of looking at minority issues through, or intensively, increasingly through a security perspective, can have some potential negative results in some of the areas that sort of like are covered by the OSCE, but also by the Council of Europe. On the one hand, this can lead to a situation whereby states could argue that they have no conflicts, even no minorities, hence they could not benefit from the existing mechanisms. But also, on the other hand, this opting out of institutions and existing mechanisms raises some concerns often about state equality, or rather inequality, so that there is increasing attention by international institutions directed at some regions, but not at other regions, which, of course, to a certain extent, this is, of course, needed and can be welcomed. But on the other hand, I think we should not fall for the trap that we accept the issue that diversity management belongs to someone else, that minorities are someone else's issues, even someone else's problem. We all live in diverse societies, and we all live with persons belonging to minorities who seek equality, who seek equal opportunities. And I think it's our challenge, very much in line with the Ljubljana guidelines on integration of diverse societies, to really view minorities not as a problem, not as a security threat, but as an integral part of our diverse societies. So as an integral, but also as a valued and equally important part of our diverse societies. Now that brings me to the second part that I said, I was going to address some of the broader challenges the Southeastern European region is facing, perhaps more narrowly, the Western Balkans region is facing. For the broader region, I already said that there are some states that are not part of the legally binding instruments that we have. When one looks at the Western Balkans from the broader perspective, I think one needs to absolutely emphasize what we have heard from my previous speakers, that this is a region where minority rights have become part of the legal systems have become part of legislation, have been at the center of attention of governments across the region. And lots has been done, not just in terms of legislation and action plans, but also concrete projects, some of which we heard in the first two presentations, and then also some concrete issues that were mentioned by Nina before me. But I think there are many challenges that our combined instruments, the collection that I mentioned in the beginning, are not mentioning. And my previous speakers have mentioned some of them. And I think we should not lose sight of the issues that refer to democracy, rule of law, human rights, of course, minority rights being part of human rights. But some of the bigger political issues, I think, are preventing a more successful outcomes of all this attention that has been paid to minority rights by international institutions, but also by domestic actors to an equal extent. No one today has mentioned issues such, I believe, such as corruption, identity politics by other states that is being imported into states and sort of using minority cards for instrumentalizing other political goals. I think this is indeed one of the challenges that is often also difficult to address when you are addressing a particular state, and then you kind of realize that some of the issues are being imported into the state. And here again, the Bolzano-Bozen recommendations on national minorities in interstate relations come very handy, so that states know that they need to self-constrain their actions, not just because this may be viewed as an interference in internal affairs, or not just because this may strengthen the perception, the wrong perception that minorities indeed are a problem, but also because this deprives minorities of the agency. Someone else talks on their behalf, and this is not conducive to societal integration that we would like to see, whereby, as was said before, individuals need to participate, need to be included, regardless of their ethnicity, their religion, their first languages, etc. Often we talk of captured states. The rector mentioned the very important element of preventing political influence on institutions. These are the issues that I think can be addressed only jointly by cooperation of different institutions, different bodies of institutions. Of course, we all have our own mandate and we can do the job within our mandate. But I think coordination and cooperation is really key, so that we all address these remaining or ongoing challenges, so that indeed these good instruments that we have with the excellent initiatives, concrete issues, projects on the ground that are a demonstration that diversity is in fact something that is not just beautiful, but it's common. It's part of who we are in Europe, in individual states, and of course in the world. And in this respect, let me conclude that on behalf of the advisory committee, but also between the Council of Europe and the OSCE, we very much look forward to future cooperation with the High Commissioner, the team, the office in The Hague, as only these joint efforts can really address the issues in the right direction, as it were. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed. So, and thank you for this insightful perspective, broadening a little bit our discussions to include also political context and for signaling those challenges that we face in diversity management, in ensuring the proper cohesion of societies. And it really is the perception of the HCNM office that Council of Europe is our natural partner, especially through its Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities. And this is perfectly exemplified in this joint digital collection of documents related to the national minority issues that I strongly encourage you to also use in your activities. Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite, last but not least, Christoph, another representing another institution that we cooperate very closely with, and recently High Commissioner Abdurakhmanov signed the landmark memorandum of understanding on cooperation with the UNHCR, and Christoph has been very instrumental in bringing this idea to the successful conclusion. So, Christoph, please.
Thank you, Marek. Excellencies, distinguished participants. It's really an honor for UNHCR being given the opportunity to contribute to today's event. And I must say, I felt intellectually very much enriched by listening to my co-panelists' fascinating observations. Maybe our contribution is a little bit more technical, but we need this interplay between politics and the technical dimension, as very often, as we say, the devil is in the details, and maybe their observations on statelessness prevention can help. We are pleased to be here because we have enjoyed 30 years of close cooperation with the institution of the High Commissioner on National Minorities, in particular in the field of prevention and reduction of statelessness, which is mandated, as to which UNHCR is mandated to address by the UN General Assembly. Other areas we cooperate is information exchange on early warning, and this is crucial for UNHCR to update contingency planning and preparedness measures to respond quickly in case all the prevention of conflicts efforts have failed. I remember, and forgive me these personal observations, very well from my early career in UNHCR, the meetings I had with the first High Commissioner on National Minorities, Mr. Max van der Stoel, when we were in the deep field on the Crimea, and other meetings in Kiev, when we tried to advocate vis-à-vis the Ukrainian authorities for a receptive approach towards returning Crimean Tatars who had been deported to Central Asia in the Stalin period. And we managed to address a lot of related statelessness issues, including helping to overcome the issue of over 25,000 de jure stateless persons. And in addition, with over 100,000 additional returning formerly deported persons, we also found a solution in the smooth transfer from their Central Asian original citizenship to gaining Ukrainian citizenship in a way which prevented statelessness in the process, which was quite a challenge. Frank and constructive dialogue with the authorities, when appropriate, and Mr. van der Stoel introduced it, and you continue this very convincingly quiet diplomacy. Human rights and rule of law-based approaches paired with the creativity and the design of administrative processes and rules and structures. Engagement of civil society, including often forgotten faith-based organizations. And also importantly, awareness building and reaching out, for example, through mobile teams to the affected population, including the most marginalized elements of the society, often residing in the most remote parts of the Crimea, were key elements for this success. These elements remain crucial in addressing today's remaining or newly evolving statelessness challenges in the OSCE region, including in Southeastern Europe. UNHCR is very pleased, as Marek has mentioned, that our cooperation has now been further instrumentalized by the signing of a memorandum of understanding in June. Our cooperation will continue to build on regular strategic dialogues, as well as on regular information exchange and situation assessments done also at working level. It also includes joint events or mutual participation in workshop and conferences. And when it comes to cooperation on capacity building, I would like to draw your attention to this joint UNHCR OSCE or joint OSCE UNHCR handbook on statelessness. Some extra copies are available near the entrance. The right to a nationality is firmly embedded in international human rights law. Article 24 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 7 of the Convention on the Right of the Child. Therefore, statelessness should be overcome. Statelessness may undermine the enjoyment of rights, including access to social, medical, and other services. It deprives persons of opportunities. And as Nino had emphasized very much, it also prevents the full enjoyment of political rights and participation in political dialects. Overcoming statelessness is, however, not only in the interest of the individual concerned. It also serves the broader society in as much as it reduces the risk of tensions and helps in the activation of human potential and human resources, serving the country's economy and wealth. There is overwhelming evidence that more open and inclusive societies are more prosperous, effective, and resilient. Statelessness in the OSCE area is primarily caused by the dissolution of states, for example, the USSR and former Yugoslavia, paired with introduction of legislation defining the initial body of citizens of succeeding states at different times, movements of persons during the transition period, and gaps in documentation, including among members of ethnic minorities such as Roma and Sinti. These minorities are very often disproportionately impacted by statelessness. So we have a double connection. Overcoming statelessness helps in protecting minority rights. Enhancing minority rights and awareness will help to overcome statelessness. So both has to be pursued in parallel. Situations of statelessness in Southeastern Europe and efforts to overcome have received particular attention by UNHCR, and we are very pleased about the significant progress which has been observed in the recent years, including based on the pledges made during the Global Refugee Forum in 2019, in particular at the high-level segment, where former High Commissioner on National Minorities, Lamberto Sagné, was one of the key senior participants. For the sake of time, I will not read in bullet points particular progress made in country legislation. The written version of my document will be shared, but all throughout the Southeastern Europe region, and in particular in North Macedonia, with a number of legislative initiatives, significant progress has been made. And also, when it comes to implementation, we see that several hundred persons in the very thorough implementation of new legislation have already been granted North Macedonian citizenship, but also other countries in the region have made progress. However, despite all this progress, there are areas for improvement. For example, as to administrative and legislative procedures, some of which still impose impediments as to the issuance of birth certificates and confirmation of nationality, as well as issuance of civil status documents, especially when the person concerned is residing in another country, in a third country. So there are ways of improved consular services, exchange, enhance, speeded up information exchange could still be addressed. Remaining risks of fragmented implementation practices vis-a-vis socially marginalized persons should be addressed. It is key, especially in the post-USSR and post-former Yugoslavia society, to raise awareness among persons of concern how important citizenship actually is. In the USSR, you had the Propiska system, so it was not necessarily on the radar of the persons concerned. To achieve this, good practices shall be shared and remaining gaps be addressed. Inter alia, at the high level, regionally jointly organized conference titled OSCE UNHCR Regional Conference on Access to Civil Documentation and Prevention of Statelessness in Eastern Europe, which will be conducted under the auspices of the OSCE North Macedonian Chairpersonship and is now scheduled for mid of October this year. Moreover, and I'm close to conclusion, UNHCR's Global Refugee Forum in December 23 provides an important opportunity for states as well as for regional organizations to make additional commitments and to present the progress made. UNHCR is pleased that the High Commissioner, together with his colleagues from ODIHR, are considering submitting a renewed pledge at the Global Refugee Forum along the lines of building capacity and awareness among the 57 OSCE participating states over the next 5 years by organizing joint events together with UNHCR, addressing the issue of statelessness. In conclusion, please allow me to emphasize, statelessness can be resolved, but it's ultimately for the states to take action and to end statelessness on their territories. International actors, such as the High Commissioner on National Minority and UNHCR, can and are committed to assist states inter alia by gaining a better understanding of the underlying issues, for example, undertaking mapping studies, surveys, give advice on the conduct of census, that such censuses are are used for identifying stateless persons in an optimized way. And we can also offer advice on avenues for solutions. We need to continue efforts to align advocacy, not necessarily identical because mandates are slightly different, but not to contradict each other and to have a common direction in moving the challenges forward. I hope that today's event, including our humble UNHCR intervention, contribute to the renewal of commitment and to moving further towards the aim of ending statelessness inter alia, but not confined to the OSCE region. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Christoph, for sharing your remarks based on the 30 years long experience in humanitarian work. And we highly value this well-established and practical cooperation with UNHCR, especially on the issues related to the statelessness. Let me also remind our audience that on the 17th of October this year, there will be joint OSCE UNHCR regional conference on access to civil documentation and prevention of statelessness in southeastern Europe, in Skopje, organized jointly by number of institutions, including HCNM, but also CIO, UNHCR, as I mentioned, ODIHR, and OSCE mission to Skopje. So we are very much looking forward to this event. So with this presentation, we reached the end of the list of our speakers in this panel. I would like to thank all of them for very enriching, inspiring presentations. It is very difficult to sum up or to summarize 3 decades of conflict prevention efforts in southeastern Europe by successive high commissioners within the time frame of this panel, basically 90 minutes. But I think that we have at least managed to present you with different perspectives based on practical examples of successive actions and let's say examples of situations, circumstances, but also certain historical evolution and how they are linked to the HCNM mandate. So, for example, the work that was mentioned here by Robert, so this kind of trip down the memory line brought us forward with an evolution of an idea that the overreaching strategy, one society for all, is a very important guiding policy document that brings together different elements in order to further develop inter-ethnic communication between different diverse cultures and communities within North Macedonia. At the same time, I'm very grateful to his detailed overview of this process, and we look forward to our future cooperation. With regard to this emblematic Southeast European University in Tetovo, I think you, Professor Begetti, can be proud of the current stage of development of this institution that represents the best features actually of, on one hand, bold initiative put in practice, but also kind of idea that achieved practical results as exemplified in the informations about the number of students, graduates, different faculties and streams of education. With regards to presentation of Nina, I think we were once again convinced that this kind of synergy that is actually functioning between OSCE institutions, including HCNM and field presences, is the most productive approach. And based on your experience from 2 countries of the region, I think we can be convinced that this focus on decentralization, non-discrimination, language and education rights, as well as meaningful representation of all citizens, they constitute this solid basis for managing diversity within society, and also prevention of potential inter-ethnic tensions. I can only agree that this is also the perspective of the institution of the High Commissioner on National Minorities, and High Commissioner Abdrahmanov is always underlying this, highlighting this cooperation during his country visits with colleagues who are present and supportive during those visits. With regards to the Council of Europe and this complementarity between our institutions, I think this is a very valid point to seek and to encourage member states, participating states, to address those potential challenges that you mentioned, Dr. Rotter. So we are still probably, as High Commissioner mentioned yesterday in his statement to the PC, in the middle of the road. So we achieved a lot during those 30 years of existence, but still a lot is to be done. And we look at minority issues through the perspective of our mandate that was created, elaborated by participating states 30 years ago, with also slightly different political context. But I think taking into account the evolution of the political environment within OSCE area, still minority rights standards and implementation of those rights, they remain of paramount importance. And I would like also to mention the role of the UNHCR and this practical aspects that Christoph listed in, especially addressing the issue of statelessness. So this is something that remains on the agenda of HCNM, and this is one of the issues where we speak with the common voice, as exemplified by joint publications and also by exchange of information regarding, for example, early warning indications. With this, I would like to move towards the Q&A session. And if I look correctly at the what's in front of me, so we have a little bit more than 30 minutes. But with your permission, I would like to kick off with one question that I would like our panelists to reflect on, namely the role of gender, youth, and civil society as integration drivers. How can we ensure the meaningful inclusion and empowerment of these groups in decision-making process and in formulation of policies? And maybe if you could present some successful examples of initiatives that actually effectively engage gender, youth, civil society in efforts promoting social cohesion. So who would like to start? Please, Robert.
Yeah, thank you. Well, our strategy was brought in a wider consultation with the civil society, so that the participation of the NGOs in the process of drafting, but also in the implementation of strategy was huge. But I would even say that just recently our government adopted a common methodology of bringing up new strategies and different kind of policy documents, so that the involvement of civil society is a necessary condition for any new policy to be adopted and implemented. It must be consulted thoroughly with the civil society. As far as the gender and youth is considered, not only in a particular area, but let's say we implemented into our policy again a number of, so let's say quotas. Maybe these quotas or percentages are not popular if we speak in the common fight for equality, but they really bring results. So once we introduce that we require at least 30% of women to be represented in the parliament and in the level of local authorities, then we really come to improvement, not only in quantity, but more and more on youth representation in society, also requiring that the youth percentage on every level would be regarded, including different measures how to improve their involvement and participation and the prioritization in many fields. And then we brought a new strategy. Now we are also developing a new law on gender equality. In the same time, when the measures are concerned in our, let's say, regional development plans or granting in different ministries, like in the Ministry of Agriculture, there were special lines for let's say rural women entrepreneurs or for other aspects of the employment, and giving more significant roles and mainstreaming when it comes to different social roles and social advantages.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Please.
Thank you for this important question. As far as the advisory committee is concerned, we always, when we go to country visits, we indeed make sure that we meet local civil society organizations, independent researchers. Here, I think, of course, we live in a very different world than we used to live in 30 years ago. So sometimes one has to be careful of possible gongos somehow entering the sphere of the civil society organizations. But this is certainly something that we always engaged with. The same goes with women and youth. Here again, if we focus on sort of situation with so-called captured states, where a small political elite, usually together with a small economic elite, really has the powerful role in individual states, then one has to be careful and engage with the youth that are not sort of possible political, do not belong or do not necessarily exclusively participate in young political organizations, but are also just young people interested in the future of their states. So we would often go to universities, make connections with our colleagues, and then talk to young people who will often, unfortunately, tell us that their plans are to leave the region, which is also another reason why diversity management through minority rights and addressing the bigger challenges is so important. But one additional aspect that I would like us all to also reflect on is to look at the needs and interests of the elderly. We recently in the advisory committee looked at one of the Nordic states where we discussed issues like the needs of the elderly to have the elderly care homes with employees that can speak the language of the elderly, who, of course, if they face specific health issues, they will be really in a
very much in a situation where minority speakers, the care workers really need to speak the languages so that they can access the rights. So I think with the aging populations, we need to add possible another category to this kind of like focus that we all pay attention to.
Extremely valid point. Thank you. I see Nina, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So indeed, for the gender, now already we live since 2000 or so, since the Beijing Declaration and 1325. And so I think we are not lacking modalities and practices. So it is just to pick from them if one wants to, and that of course is the crucial thing. There are various quotas, obviously. I know that there's a bit of criticism about how they really work, the quota for parliamentary elections. But I think some of them work pretty well. They might not be perfect, but at least they are showing a signal, and they are increasing number of women in the political party lists, in the parliament, and so forth. In Finland, we have something which is a legal obligation. It is for the appointment of the public bodies, like let's say by the cities or by the state, 40-60. So there has to be, you know, the of two genders, 40-60 or 60-40. So these kind of things are there, and I think it is a bit of our responsibility always to try to ensure, or at least request and require, that they are being followed. For youth, there are also in my city in Helsinki, since you mentioned, I'm a member in the city council in Helsinki, we have something called a youth council, which is basically that there's youth organizations who provide a number of people elected amongst them, and they come every, let's say, every few months to the city council to present with their ideas, and they come with initiatives, and we had to, as city councillors, we had to respond to those and all that. So that's a nice mechanism. And finally, civil society. I think all of us by now, when we travel and go and meet with counterparts, we always want to meet with the civil society. And of course, the government institutions in any country, at least in Finland, there are mechanisms to have consultations. Obviously, you cannot always do everything what every single organization is asking. So that is then there's the balance. How do you take into account what is being proposed? But there has to be that constant dialogue. So mechanisms exist plentifully. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Baggetti, please.
Yeah, thank you. 2 weeks ago, we had the promotion of graduation generation of students. And usually we elect the best students from each faculty. There were 9 students, 8 of them female, 1 male. And the president of board, Professor Klaus Tottermann, asked me, what happened? You have to create a quota for male. So I think I mentioned this case, that I think now it's not time more for thinking about quotas. Thinking about the merit system, thinking about the making equal opportunity, justice opportunity, and then we'll come to the surface, the real situation. We see the quotas in the parliament, yes, quantitatively help a little bit in some stage, but later, no, because we don't see the quality there. So in terms of that, I think that there are other measures or instruments to promote the gender equality more. Related to youth, of course, they need always support, but I think that digitalization is making to them more advancing compared to older generation. If we are going in that direction in the country, promoting more and more digitalization, digital services, everything, the youth will be much more enabled to use that. Civil society always has to be supported by institution and grants and different projects, but very, I may say, very, very transparent in the procedures and announcing very transparently, and criteria has to be on place. Otherwise, they are misused. And closing this, in terms of, as Christoph mentioned, here about the human rights, I think the main constraint of human rights is today very, very high structural corruption in the institutions. Many citizens are discriminated because they have no possibility to pay for the services. And we have to see a solution inside of that, considering somehow controlling from credible institutions, international institutions. Believe me, in the Balkan or in that region, people want to see who are behind that, all these initiatives. Like I just want to mention OSCE or DHR. Promote a little bit and protect and progress made in the election process because of that, because they are present. If they are not present there, then it's difficult to say that really elections were so clean. So in that aspect, we have to develop more projects based on that, having some credible international institution like OSCE behind that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Christoph, as we understand, women, children, young people are overrepresented among refugees or groups that are at the center of the attention of your institution.
That is absolutely true. 3 short comments on each of the keywords. Gender. When it comes to overcoming statelessness, it's in Europe largely a historic challenge. You had in the past citizenship legislation where the father passed the citizenship to the child, not the mother alone, with exceptions by children born in wedlock. This gender discrimination in passing on citizenship has largely been overcome. In other parts of the world, it's still an issue for UNHCR. Youth. Well, it's not youth, it's early childhood. And the key is that citizenship is granted at time of birth. So to ensure that every newborn has access first to documentation, birth certificates, and then to a nationality. And this requires check and balance systems in case of single parent situation, or in case of findlings, or in other extraordinary situations. And they are not only in North Macedonia, but also in Croatia and Albania. In recent years, legislation has been improved to ensure that newborn children are granted a citizenship. So that's an area of progress. Civil society, absolutely crucial, starting from assessing situations, identifying groups of marginalized populations who are not properly documented, who may be stateless. Second, crucial in reaching out to these populations, in raising awareness. If you have new legislation, new procedures, that's not enough. The people must know about it. And there, it's classical NGOs, but it's also faith-based organizations. In the Ukraine Crimean example I mentioned, our best partners in getting people informed were actually the mosques, because there they definitely went 90% of the population. So they were a very good information channel. And the last area where we need the civil society is when it comes to practical assistance. It could be helping with legal and procedural advice. It could be in pushing that fees, naturalization fees or documentation fees are waived. And NGOs also played a very big role when we did the mobile teams. You had one government official, one HCR, and the logistic was organized by NGOs. So we need NGOs in all the phases. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now I would like to open the floor for questions with only kind request to remain close to the topic of this event, namely building long-term social cohesion in Southeastern Europe. And if you could identify yourself, because maybe we don't know all participants by name, and please state your affiliation. Thank you. Yes, I see the gentleman here, please.
Thanks, Marek. Thanks so much. First of all, I'd like congratulate of HCNM of the 3rd anniversary, and I have two just questions directly. So I am Ramil Hasan. I am Vice Chair of the Western Azerbaijan Community and a Member of Parliament of Azerbaijan. I'd like give two questions to the distinguished panelists. OSCE commitments, including those enshrined in the OSCE Istanbul Summit of 1999, clearly state that full respect for human rights, including the rights of persons belonging to national minorities, may not undermine, but strengthen territorial integrity and sovereignty, as well as a central principle of the Bolzano-Boson recommendation on national minorities in interstate relations clearly indicate that any concern in respect to minorities should be addressed with full respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of state. What are your views and takeaway on the overall framework for the protection of national minority in that context? This is the first question. And with your permission, I'd like to give second question. Right. In some participating states, commitments on protection of the rights of national minorities don't distinguish between who actually live in a country and who were expelled, like myself. The expulsion of Western Azerbaijanians from their ancestral lands in nowadays Armenia is a vivid example of that. Do you consider development a framework for addressing the rights of national minorities who were forcibly expelled from their ancestral lands? Thanks so much.
Thank you. My intention is to collect maybe a couple of questions because we are running out of time. So in order to allow others also to take the floor, please remain concise in your questions. Do I see any other requests for the floor? Yes, Shannon, please. US delegation.
Hi, thank you. I don't have a question, but just wanted to recognize the important contributions, not only of the HCNM, but all of our esteemed panelists today in addressing this very complex, very relevant, very contemporary issue. And I just wanted to thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind words. I see gentlemen over there, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Christoph Esther from the German delegation to OSCE. Thanks to all distinguished panelists for the very interesting presentations. And of course, congratulations on the anniversary to the HCNM. I have one particular question to Professor Beksitti. It was very interesting to hear about the Southeastern European University or Stool University. You explained various ways how students from different ethnic backgrounds study together. And I was wondering about ways that you have found that encourage students to also cooperate after they have graduated. Since you spoke about prizes, maybe at graduation, maybe there's also a way to continue, like to encourage entrepreneurs or like students to found companies together, things like that. Maybe you can share some of your experience. And then if I may have another question, because many of the examples that you have shared from 30 years of work in Western Balkans, I think are addressed to well-intended actors, but I was also wondering about, in general, about malign actors. Doesn't have to be state actors necessarily, but could also be politicians or individual groups that spread discord, that use it to lever influence. And I was wondering about best practice examples that you have witnessed, what can be done against those who actually try to misuse and to abuse national minorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do not see any other requests for the floor, so I would like to invite our distinguished panelists to react to those questions. So please. Would like to start? Nina, please.
Well, thank you. I mean, I only can offer some reflection on the last question, which is basically, you know, sometimes it happens. I think colleague was talking about here fake organizations or using certain possibilities to advance a cause, which not necessarily is not for a larger good. Personally, I think that they are always, very often, there might be malign actors, and one has to, obviously, very often we know possibly who such actors do represent. But in a way, sometimes I'm also thinking that sometimes a so-called malign actor might have a different way to verbalize the issue, which is somewhere there underground nevertheless. And as diplomats, I'm sure we are trying to, I'm trying to find out that, okay, what is it about? And then try to rather address and look into the question, the issue at stake, rather than thinking that, oh, this is a bad actor and I don't want to listen to that person. So in a way, I think there's a way how to try to be inclusive in consultations, but then understand that there are various interests in those consultations, and then take them on board as is good for the larger process. I mean, this is a kind of a methodology I'm sure many of us are exercising. But obviously sometimes there might be totally actors, for example, in hybrid situations, which are want to just spoil the dialogue, which is not helpful. And then there are mechanisms to try to address those. That's all I can say. Thank you. But good question. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Dajati, please.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me opportunity in addition to explain some initiatives that we took about encouraging students to be more faster employed and to not think directly in one direction to migrate, and especially in Germany, because they mostly like German destination. We have a many project and institution developed inside of university campus, like starting from career center that we train them, first of all, and trained and again, helping them how to apply, how to find a job, and all support how they develop then after that professionally, not just finding job and how they, what are their, let's say, problems in the job, how to develop their professional activity later on. We have a different project run at university with the startups and business angels. And some of them are supported by many projects from international donors, like it's German GIZ. And you know better that. There is a project for accelerator for more than 1,500 students for next 5 years. It's a huge amount of support to every student to give if they have their business idea. We are supporting them to generate this idea and to start a business, supporting with different, like, for example, giving to them offices, giving to them support, administrative support at university, because it's huge. We have a huge, let's say, precondition for that in the campuses. Also, we have very good alumni of university. Through that, actually, we develop permanently, we call academic completion program. If some students, as I mentioned, leave the university temporarily and go to the labor market. So they are coming back after 5 years working with a different experience, and we start to promote with them again the academic completion program. All these things has been support by international community established, business development center, as I mentioned, technology park, career center service, because was not just infrastructurally university established, but as I mentioned, institutionally as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, Dr. Roder.
We as independent experts, we listen to all different stakeholders, different actors, and then we try to balance how to achieve really the goals of minority protection, diversity management through minority rights. This means that no one is right all the time. That also applies to persons belonging to minorities, as well as some governmental officials, as well as sometimes some civil society organizations that have a particular interest. So I think when one deals with malign actors, as you put it, if someone is instrumentalizing minority issues for other political goals, that's probably the most difficult case. There, in a way, possibly you can name and shame and pinpoint the issue, and then possibly make a recommendation that such practices are not conducive to long-term societal integration. Recently, the advisory committee was sort of facing a difficult challenge. Normally, we would say minorities should organize themselves. They have the autonomy, of course, to elect their own representatives. But sometimes you end up with representatives that are the same all the time. They repeat the same messages and they don't engage in what we heard in the beginning, in the true dialogue, where you listen to each other and you try to move ahead. And in this particular case, the government used the opportunity and said, minorities cannot agree, so nothing can be done. And then, of course, we had a long discussion and we were sort of then making a recommendation that sometimes maybe mandates of minority representatives could also be limited. If this is a way to move ahead so that you somehow try to move beyond, we don't talk about malign actors, but the non-cooperative actors that are not contributing to the goals in our particular case of the Framework Convention. But it's always this balancing act. And I think when there is political willingness that we heard so frequently, then things can indeed be done. It's not difficult, but it's more difficult to really have the commitment to do it. And I'd just like to briefly refer to the first question we heard. Minority rights are, of course, not to be used against territorial integrity, sovereignty. On the contrary, they should be contributing to territorial integrity and sovereignty. Any other use is an abuse of minority rights, and it requires self-constraint by individual states. But I think what is also very important is that we have a regime on minority protection that is based on one fundamental principle, and that is that prime responsibility to ensure access to minority rights lies with the state with minorities. So I normally talk of this kind of principle as homework. So every state should do its homework, should engage meaningfully with persons belonging to minorities. And hopefully that reduces the interest, the space, the legitimacy of any other interest in minority issues by any other actor beyond the state that should meaningfully engage and look for solutions, manage diversity through minority rights.
Thank you so much for this comprehensive answer. So thank you for all the reactions. And now I would like to conclude the Q&A session, being mindful of the time constraints. And it is my now great pleasure to invite His Excellency, Mr. Kairat Abrahmanov, OSCE High Commissioner on National Minorities, to deliver his closing remarks. Please.
Distinguished colleagues and friends, it looks that we have today, this afternoon, a sort of reinforced PC with such a high level of, it was not just simply high level of political, diplomatic, or academic representation, but I agree with you that it was quite a high level of intellectual exercise. So, and for this, really, I'm thankful to all of you, those who are in front, sitting at podium, and to all those who supporting us with your participation and with your very interesting questions and reflections. 30 years ago, the participating states of that time, it was, as you all perfectly remember, Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe, recognized that in opportune policy choices coupled with intolerance, economic decline, social tensions, and gross violation of human rights, including those related to national minorities, represented a threat to peace and prosperity in Europe. At that time, inter-ethnic conflict was on rise, and something had to be done with it. So from this perspective, we approached to the preparatory stage for that meeting, and today we see that, as you now witnessed, the result was the establishment of the position of the High Commission on National Minorities. So now this story becoming very much familiar to you. And since then, we've witnessed extraordinary transformations, particularly in parts of OSCE area. And indeed, our own CIO, North Macedonia, has seen a remarkable change from being, I remind, the subject of the first ever early warning issued by the institution in 1999 to holding the chair of our beloved organization and providing strategic guidance to all our work. And the very presence of a minister with us today is very not simply meaningful contribution, but it's clear demonstration of commitment of North Macedonia. I would like to express my appreciation to our panelists who reflected on several historical circumstances in North Macedonia, as well as the current policy solutions. So Rector Budgeti, Madam Suomalainen, dear National Coordinator, Professor Alagozovsky, I am grateful for your willingness to join us today in spite of your very much busy schedule and to share your experience. Yet, dear friends, some of the fundamental challenges which the HCNM was initially set up to address still remain the same, and indeed new ones have emerged. So aggressive nationalism in its various manifestations continues to be a political force to be reckoned with. We see new conflicts erupt with a great cost to human life in violation of OSCE commitments and the key principles of the UN Charter. Deep prejudice, intolerance, and otherization still exist and are manipulated by these ingenious public persons eager to score easy political dividends. All countries in the OSCE region and beyond are ethnically diverse, and that will always be the case. In fact, our diversity is continually increasing and will most likely continue to do so. Unfortunately, minority issues have the potential to escalate into conflict, especially when they are instrumentalized, politicized, ultimately weaponized. I've repeatedly spoken out against the instrumentalization of national minority issues for day-to-day political messaging. And these issues of effective governance continue, though we see new expressions of them. Technological advances, while making our day-to-day life easier, also pose a challenge to effective diversity management by diminishing the lines between truth and fiction and by amplifying negative sentiments and contributing towards further divisions. These are the enduring and multifaceted challenges that we are yet to address in an effective manner. While many challenges lie before us, we do also have the tools to address them. And these tools, as we have seen from the panel discussion, are both domestic and international. Domestically, in addition to the necessary political will, a system of good and democratic governance is needed. Good governance that ensures that all stakeholders, including minorities, participate in and influence the decision-making processes. This makes for better and more widely accepted decisions, and so reduces the risk and cost of conflict internationally. On the basis of examples from the Council of Europe and the UNHCR, we've heard about two of the international mechanisms to help each one of our states to work better, both for the people of those societies and for our collective futures. And to that end, I want to underline that my mandate puts human rights principles of minority protection into a security context. So thank you, Madam Rotter, dear Petra, President of the Advisory Committee on HCNM. Thank you, dear Christoph, Mr. Bierwirt, head of the UNHCR's liaison office here. Your messages echo what I delivered yesterday, just before this, in this very hall, to the Permanent Council in the name of their delegations to the OSCE. Every national political and legal system should have minority rights at its heart. I'm grateful to the 2023 Chairpersonship of North Macedonia for the efforts they dedicated to co-organizing my mandate. I'm especially grateful again to Minister Osmani for his time today. Dear Helga Schmidt, our Honorable Secretary General, also in spite of quite, as you see, how this whole work today heavily, saturated by very important persons. So nevertheless, she spent time with us. I was inspired by the EU Special Representative for the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue and other Western Balkan regional issues, our dear friend and colleague Miroslav Lajcek, as we highlighted the 3 decades of conflict prevention work of the High Commissioner. So to that end, I want also to add that the EU-facilitated Belgrade-Pristina dialogue remains an important framework for dialogue, and my office stands ready to continue providing advice, in particular on effective mechanisms for participation of non-majority communities. So we are at your service. I would also like to thank all of you here today for your, again, support and for your decades-long cooperation and partnership with all successive High Commissioners. So as we witnessed today, some of distinguished participants worked with all 6 of them, and I wish them to continue such engagement with future High Commissioners. So allow me also to thank my team, both those who are here today and those holding the fort back in The Hague. Without the dedication and support, the work of High Commissioner would not be possible. Huge thanks go to the conference service for their invaluable support. And please also let's recognize the practical and very substantial contribution on behalf of our moderators, my distinguished colleagues, my honorable director, Ambassador Marek Shigeu, as well as Irina Vlasiuk, my head of section and senior advisor, were also in front of you, leading also our discussions. Thank you, and thank you for coming. And safe travel. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.